Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. I want to hasten to add that the president's comments Saturday night at the White House Correspondents' Dinner were relatively tame. So I'm not singling him out. It was the comedian, I forget the guy's name, that was up there making crude jokes about the Kardashian sex lives and Bill Clinton and his credentials as a grandparent and stuff like that. President Obama just threw zingers at his enemies, including the press. And some of those were actually pretty funny. I will give the president props for having a pretty good sense of comic timing. It's almost always at somebody else's expense. But he did laugh at himself. He brought Sebelius up in kind of a little part of the skit to help him kind of solve some problem with the teleprompter or the PowerPoint presentation or something, which I thought was kind of cute and kind of big of Kathleen Sebelius, because she's going to be blamed for everything in history. You know, this is going to be something that her successor is going to say, I inherited from Kathleen Sebelius, and I'm spending all my time trying to clean up her messes. And that's what Obama's going to say. Look, that's not my doing. I hired Kathleen Sebelius to do that, so don't blame me that she wasn't up to the job, that kind of stuff. So anyway, President Obama at one time took a poke at MSNBC, talking about how shocked they look because they're in a room here with a couple thousand people. And they said about MSNBC, they've never seen an audience this size before, which, again, I thought was actually pretty good. Now let's grab a couple of sound bites as we move into this last segment. One of the things I just want to mention before we do that, have clip number 1 ready to go, Rob, if you would, is that the majority ruling in the Supreme Court decision on prayer actually went back to the Continental Congress and the first session of the Continental Congress. And there was a debate there. This is 1774. Do we open this thing with prayer or not? And they were kind of divided. The delegates were divided. They were from different colonies at that time, had kind of competing interests. And one of the differences between the colonies was the difference in religious establishments. Some of them had congregational churches. Some of them had no churches. Some of them had Anglican churches. Some of them had Presbyterian churches. And so there was this tension over establishment of state churches that was a part of the Continental Congress. So Samuel Adams, and this is in the majority opinion, this is in the Supreme Court ruling, bringing back this history to life, Samuel Adams sought to bridge these differences by prodding a fellow Massachusetts delegate to move to open the session with prayer. So Sam Adams, father of the American Revolution, says, look, we're divided here. Maybe a prayer can unite us. So he goes to a guy in Massachusetts and says, look, would you make a move? Would you make a motion that we open this session with prayer? As John Adams later recounted, this motion was opposed. It was resisted, but not because opening a session with prayer was unconstitutional or a bad idea. Here was the reason. This motion was opposed on the ground that the delegates were, quote, so divided in religious sentiments, some Episcopalians, some Quakers, some Anabaptists, some Presbyterians, and some Congregationalists, that they could not join the same act of worship, could not join in the same act of worship. In response, Samuel Adams proclaimed that he was no bigot and could hear a prayer from a gentleman of piety and virtue who was at the same time a friend to his country. Putting aside his own personal prejudices, he moved to invite a local Anglican minister, Jacob Duché, to lead the first prayer. The following morning, Duché appeared in full pontificals, that means all of his clerical garb, and delivered both the Anglican prayers, and these are pre-written prayers, you get them from the Book of Prayer, delivered both the Anglican prayers for the day and an extemporaneous prayer, which is very unusual for an Anglican clergyman to do. But Duché's prayer met with wide approval from all these various Christian traditions. John Adams wrote that it filled the bosom of every man in attendance, and the practice was continued. This Supreme Court talking about this. This first congressional prayer was emphatically Christian. Again, Supreme Court, majority opinion, the first congressional prayer was emphatically Christian, and it was neither an empty formality nor strictly non-denomination. It was an Anglican prayer. But one of its purposes and presumably one of its effects was not to divide, but to unite. It is no wonder then that the practice of beginning congressional sessions with a prayer was continued after the revolution ended and the new Constitution was adopted. So fast forward from 1774 to 1789, one of the first actions taken by the new Congress when it convened in 1789, this is under now the brand new Constitution of the United States. Their first act under the Constitution of the United States was to appoint chaplains for both houses. The first Senate chaplain, an Episcopalian, was appointed on April 25th, 1789. He's the one that administered the oath of office to George Washington just 5 days later on April 30th, and he was the one that preached the sermon at the prayer service they all went to after Washington took the oath of office. And the first house chaplain, a Presbyterian, was appointed on May 1. So anyway, very, very, very good news. Number to call if you want to join the conversation, 888-589-8840. Here's a soundbite from Rob Schneider. This is clip number 1. Rob Schneider is a comedian. He's a Hollywood actor. He's a comedian. I've probably seen 1 or 2 movies he's been in, and a little bit I've seen him. He seems like he's a pretty funny guy, but he's an actor. He's a Hollywood guy, and he's on this radio program. Curtis Stegall, I think, is the name of the host of this program. This guy's a Hollywood actor. And listen to what he has to say, because my contention is if a Hollywood actor can figure it out, you and I can figure it out.
Democracies don't end well. We are sliding very fast towards fascism, and it's an ugly kind of thing, and I think there's this kind of mob mentality that's we have to be careful of.
So that's comedian Rob Schneider on Friday morning, Philadelphia WPHT-AM radio interview. And he went on to say there's a polarization that's happening. I do think you can look at the government and go, wow, it is out of control now. And if you do criticize or tend to be not directly along a liberal stand, you can get murdered, Schneider also said. So here's a guy, he's a Hollywood actor. He's figured it out. Look, we are sliding. You know, in sliding, I mean, I don't know how intentional he was in his choice of words here, but it's not like we're stumbling toward fascism or we're slowly moving toward fascism or we are creeping toward fascism or we are taking baby steps toward fascism. He says we are sliding very fast towards fascism. It's an ugly kind of thing. There's a kind of mob mentality. You know, we're seeing that in the gay lobby now. Somebody steps out of line. Tim Wildman, our president, used the analogy of all these birds in a cage or one location aviary. Somebody talks about the gay agenda. They all flap their wings except for one bird who's not that excited about the gay agenda. All the other birds flap their wings. Every time something about the gay agenda comes up, they all flap their wings. And finally, they notice that this one guy is not flapping his wings, so they start picking on him. They start pecking him, and they cower him into submission. So the next time the gay agenda comes up, he's kind of weakly flapping his wings as well. Focal Point in AFR Talk. Be right back. Stay with us.